Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Progress America Unfiltered. This is RHETT here with Tyler, Linda, and JOCELYN to talk about the one-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. This is some legislation that has some Republicans on Capitol Hill up in arms, certainly, and they do not like that it has been 1 year since this legislation has gone into place and was signed by President Biden. And there's been just some, continued attacks on things like patient advocacy, and, this the usual stuff that Republicans and groups like Big Pharma love to go after. So to bring in some experts today to talk to us about this is a pretty exciting topic. Linda, I know you're really excited to get started on this topic, so I want to pass it to you first. What are you reflecting on right now in the 1 year since the IRA?
So the Inflation Reduction Act, among many other provisions, finally gives Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices. And it's huge when it's fully implemented. It's going to save seniors hundreds of dollars a year on average and thousands of dollars in many cases, especially for people who rely on really expensive drugs to survive and to thrive. So this is going to finally let seniors keep their own hard-earned Social Security benefits and not turn them over to big pharma CEOs. But pharma and their allies in the Chamber of Commerce are so desperate to keep drug prices high that they've filed multiple lawsuits to try to stop the IRA's drug pricing provisions. These are totally frivolous, although with a lot of Trump appointees in the courts, you just never know. But there really needs to be a lot of public shaming about this, first of all, because these are companies that do care about their reputations. They want to advertise their drugs on TV. They want people to like them. And so we really need to make sure that the public knows that no, these are the companies that are literally filing lawsuits to keep your drug prices high. And to that effect, there was a petition delivery and action in front of the Chamber of Commerce, which these organizations, farmer groups, are members of the Chamber, and the Chamber has filed its own lawsuits. So we delivered 150,000 petitions to the Chamber of Commerce, and several patients also spoke to tell their stories of why the IRA's drug pricing provisions, these lower drug prices, are going to make such a huge difference in their lives and let them keep their own money.
Yeah, this is something that I think strikes the core of what kind of our guiding message is here on Progress America Unfiltered, when we always say that advocacy, organizing, all of these things do pay off. And Linda, I love the expression that you use, public shaming, because that is absolutely something that there has to be room for, especially when we're talking about these groups that are trying to take medication away from seniors in the form of making it way too expensive that anybody can afford. And you mentioned Social Security too. We know that is just when Social Security is said, we know a Republican politician turns their head and tries to just guard up against anything to protect Social Security, because we know that's their favorite thing to go after. Tyler, I want to get your reaction to what Linda had to say. What are you reflecting on in this 1 year since the IRA? And what do you think this means for organizing?
I mean, one, I'm struck because I didn't even know all of those provisions were in the IRA on my own. And this is something that I've been, talking about and learning about for, the past year since it's been out. And so I do think it's really important to talk about the fact that this was a mega omnibus bill that had so many important things that there's no way we'll be able to cover them all. But I'm so glad that Linda was able to bring up that context. I have been thinking about the IRA in the climate context a lot recently. We just had a 2-part episode about climate change and climate nihilism and climate disasters and all of that stuff. And the Inflation Reduction Act is actually one of the biggest pieces of climate legislation in modern history, if not the biggest in modern history, and invests $400 billion into clean energy investments, sets the goal to try to get us to, zero emissions by, I think, 2030. So it's a really, really big climate bill, which that's the part that I was excited about and focusing on, and seeing the ways that we can transition into clean energy and get off of our dependence on fossil fuels, which we're slowly doing. And I do say slowly. I think, that's the thing when you get bills like this, is they come in the form of financial investments, not always immediate results. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, it's been 1 year, but I don't know if we'll truly be able to understand the repercussions of this bill for another 5 years, another 8 years, another 10 years, to see how much of an impact this bill has on the current state of the climate crisis, as well as the state of, people's earned benefits and Social Security, and seeing if we can finally stave off Republicans from, doing everything in their power to keep people from getting the benefits that they've put in for and that we've all earned. Linda brought up a good point while we were planning for this episode, that every Republican voted against the IRA. So every single Republican voted to keep drug prices high for seniors, to keep us in the midst of the climate crisis. And, it's pretty harrowing when you think about that. So it's amazing that this bill got passed. But JOCELYN, I would love to hear from you. Any thoughts on any of that? And the state of the IRA.
What you said, Tyler, about like the problem with really victorious legislation is it's not like, okay, bill passed, society changed. This is where trickle down economics is a thing. Like we allow budget for these programs. We say, okay, the government is going to do these things, but it takes months and years and sometimes decades for society to reflect the good or bad consequences of that. I mean, our generation is very great at articulating how Reaganomics created the problems we have now. And the flip side of that is like, we have so much to be excited about with all the incredible work the Biden administration is doing and has done. But, it's on us as engaged citizens to tell people, like, we have reasons to be hopeful. Good things are happening. Our government this is the most progressive piece of legislation to ever be passed. People say since the New Deal, but like, no, in terms of like money and intentions and things, it does, like, it provides subsidies for people to buy electric vehicles. It provides a massive investment in green energy and like all sorts of transitions away from the planet killing economy we have now that will create hope and also jobs. But again, we're not going to see the consequences of that for years. So it's on us to get the news out.
Absolutely, JOCELYN. And when we're thinking about just like what the implementation of this is going to look like as we mark a 1-year anniversary, I want to pass it back to Linda and ask you, Linda, because you are one of the best political communicators that I know. Like, what do you think is that difference between what we're talking about in this circle, what's actually in the legislation, right, and the impacts of it? And like, why are those messages not reaching the general population yet? Like, and what can we do to maybe help further the message of what's actually going on in this legislation?
Yeah, so one thing that makes it a little bit tricky, but should resolve itself, is that some of these provisions just don't kick in for a year or two after the legislation was passed. Like with the drug pricing provisions, there's a whole timeline, but basically people are going to start seeing the lower drug prices in the next couple of years. But for the most part, they really haven't yet. Climate, similar sort of thing, that these tax credits and other things just needed some time to become available and for people to find out and to use them. And so that's just a challenge sometimes with progressive legislation and policy making, is that we're trying to actually do things here, and sometimes that can be complicated, and especially with Republicans, working so hard to hollow out the federal government and underfund it. And so things like do take time, and it's complicated to communicate about policy, but we just have to keep saying it. And meanwhile, the other side, like, it's very easy to be against something. And so one thing I do think to focus on is just to keep talking about those Republicans, what Taylor said, that every single one of them voted to keep drug prices high. And, to that effect, we did another action actually on the IRA anniversary as well, with some groups in Colorado protesting against Lauren Boebert and the fact that not only did she vote against the IRA to keep drug prices high, but she also voted for another bill that it fortunately did not become law, but if it had, it would have underfunded the Social Security Administration, made it far more difficult for people to get their earned benefits, and it would have also cut veterans' benefits, so taken away the benefits that people earn serving our country. And I think it's important to focus, even with people like Boebert, who are constantly saying and doing just the most shocking, terrible things, to also focus on just the ways that they're standard Republicans, which means voting against what the American people want to do, to cut our earned benefits and hurt them. And, in terms of the provisions of the IRA, I do think people will learn about them as we kick in. But for now, it's it'll break through more to focus on the Republicans and what they're doing and how they're voting to hurt us.
Yeah, Linda, thank you so much for that. And I think, as we're waiting for these provisions to really kick in from the Inflation Reduction Act, I think it really outlines too, like how easy it is to fall into a sense of fatigue around these things. Like I think about all the people that have been advocating for things like helping combat the climate crisis, as we just talked about last week. And any sort of kind of inch that we earn on these things feels like it's always going to be up against a wall from people within the government trying to push back against it. So even after we earn legislation, because it is earned when we advocate, organize, and win things like this, that it will always kind of face these challenges. As we mentioned, Big Pharma is trying to launch legal challenges against lowering these prescription drug prices. Like this is things that are happening after we win the legislation. Like this is kind of, the story does not stop after the legislation is won. They have the lawyers, they have the people, they have the executives that they're employing to help undo the progress that was fought and earned for in order to do things like harm seniors who are just trying to get prescription drugs at an affordable price. So really kind of scary stuff going on here, but all of this is just such a good sign to keep organizing and keep fighting and just keep watching for the things that you really care about. And I just want to kind of open up the floor now. Tyler, maybe you want to jump in here. Is there any other takeaways that you have as we talk about organizing in the 1-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act?
I think this has been such a helpful and important conversation. I think my biggest takeaway is just that, this was one of the most progressive bills like ever passed in history. Now we need to work with the Biden administration and whoever else to ensure that it becomes the second most progressive bill passed in American history. We have to keep pushing for progress. We can't just say, oh, well, this was passed, so now we're done working. I really, really think that we need to continue pushing for more on climate, more on affordable healthcare, more on affordable prescription prices, more on protecting and defending Social Security and Medicare. So that's my biggest takeaway. This was a great start. So let's see what we can do in the next year to further reduce inflation. We did it, Joe.
We did it, Joe, and there's more to do, Joe. So we will be sure to follow this saga as it unfolds in the years ahead as the Inflation Reduction Act goes through implementation, and hopefully people reach these benefits that were outlined in this landmark legislation. But until then, make sure you are organizing, advocating, and always fighting for the things that you care about. And we'll be sure to follow along here at Progress America Unfiltered. Make sure to like, share, comment, tell us what you thought down below. If there's a topic you want us to cover, put it in the description or the comment section of this video. Let's do it. And thank you all for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.